Hey guys, tonight we're climbing into one of the most thoroughly airbrushed decades of the 20th century, the 1950s working class housewife era, except not the version on the magazine cover, not the pearls, not the gleaming fridge, not the husband who comes home at 5 with a briefcase and absolutely nothing to confess, the actual one. The one with coal ash on the windowsill and lye soap on the hands and something unidentifiable simmering on a 2-ring burner since 6 a.m. If this kind of quietly devastating, deeply factual, almost too tired to be angry history is the sort of thing that helps you wind down, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And much gratitude to the listener who suggested tonight's topic. Wherever you are on the planet right now, I trust you are already horizontal. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always somehow 5 inches the morning somewhere on this map. And somewhere on this map, a kettle is on a coal grate and a woman in a cardigan is wondering whether the kindling will catch. Dim the lights, turn on a fan if you have one, get comfortable, pull the blanket up a little tighter, because where we're going, the kitchen is the only warm room in the house, and the bedroom window has frost on the inside. Have you ever wondered what it actually cost to live inside the decade that everyone else's nostalgia is made of? What was a Monday morning like when the magazine said, "full-time housewife," but the rent said absolutely not? How did you feed 4 people on a wage the government had decided, in writing, ought to be half of what the man at the next bench earned for the same job? What happened to the children while you were on the factory floor, and did someone's watching them mean someone, or just technically someone? Could you survive a wash day that began before dawn with a coal grate, a tin tub, a washboard, and approximately 0 hot water pressure? Did you go to the doctor? Did you go to the dentist? The orange at Christmas, was that, in fact, the only orange? Congratulations. You're waking up in a 2-up, 2-down terraced house in Birmingham, or a Milltown flat in Greensboro, or a backstreet rental in East London, and it is March of 1953, and it is 5 in the morning, and the grate is cold. Good luck. You wake at 5 because the fire requires you to. The rest of the house is asleep, and the house is cold, and the cold is in the floorboards, and the floorboards are between you and the kitchen, where the grate sits dark and full of yesterday's ash. You're not allowed to start the day before the fire does. You crouch in front of the grate in your nightdress and a cardigan that smells of soap and wool, and you begin. The kindling is in the scuttle. The matches are on the mantel. First, the ash. Yesterday's coal leaves a fine grey powder and several larger chunks that didn't fully burn, and you scoop all of it into a metal bin with a small hand shovel while your knuckles are still numb. The ash is warm in the centre, not warm enough to be useful, just warm enough to remind you it was recently a fire and has opinions about becoming one again. You carry the bin to the back step, set it down, and a small cloud of ash rises and settles on your cardigan. This is the beginning of your day. It is 7 inches the morning. The kindling goes in first, then the coal on top, then the paper twisted into a cone underneath because the draft in this chimney requires a specific argument before it cooperates. You've been having this argument for 4 years. Some mornings you win in 6 minutes. Some mornings the grate simply declines, and you start again, and the cold gains another quarter hour on you. The whole ritual, ash out, grate laid, fire caught, coal banked, takes about 45 minutes when everything goes correctly. Nothing has gone correctly since March. The frost is on the inside of the bedroom window, which means the glass itself is colder than the air in the room, which means the room is doing its best and its best is insufficient. The kitchen is the one warm room in the house. By the time the fire is going properly, the kitchen smells of coal smoke and damp wool and something faintly metallic that no one has ever named but everyone in this street recognizes. It's the smell of winter indoors. The smell is grey, present and quietly insistent. Not bad, not good, just aggressively there. Outside, the milkman's electric float hums past at 5:30, bottles clinking in the dark like a very small, very committed orchestra. The coal delivery won't come until Thursday. You have enough until Wednesday if you bank the fire carefully at night and don't let anyone sit in front of it with the door open, which your husband will do this evening without noticing and without being told he's done it. You know this already. You bank the coal accordingly. Miss us. Doreen Tibbs, 2 doors down, does all of this in the same order every morning and has done since 1946. You've never discussed it. You don't need to. You can hear her bin scraping the back step at 5 past 5, and she can hear yours, and in this way the street wakes itself up, woman by woman, grate by grate, before the men and children have opened their eyes. It's not a system. It's just what happens when the alternative is a cold house and a family that looks at you like you've failed a test they didn't mention. By 6, the kitchen is warm enough. You put the kettle on. 37% of homes in England and Wales in 1951 have no fixed bath, which means the tin tub under the stairs, which means Saturday, which means 6 more days. For now there is tea, and the fire is going, and the house will wake up shortly and find everything in order, which is the closest thing to gratitude you're going to get this morning. You carry yesterday's ash to the bin in the alley before the milkman comes. The ash is warm in the metal scuttle, and it leaves a fine grey film on your wrist where the cardigan rides up. The bin is half full from the rest of the row, and the lid is heavy, and the wind from the alley has been waiting all night for someone to open it. You set the scuttle down. You put your weight on the lid. You tip. You straighten up and walk back inside. The milkman's electric float hums at the end of the street before you can see it. You know the sound the way you know the drip of the kitchen tap, not consciously, just as a fact your body has filed away. Missus. Adkins from number 7 is already back inside. You can tell by the click of her latch. She started the fire 4 minutes before you did, and she has never once mentioned it, which is its own kind of competition. The fire itself. You laid it last night, paper twisted into knots, then kindling crossed in a small grid, then the coal set on top with the care of someone building something that actually matters, because it does. This morning you coax the match to the paper and crouch there watching it catch. The smoke goes up when it should. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the flue is cold, and the smoke has opinions about direction, sullen, contrary, and reliably theatrical, and the kitchen fills before the draught opens, and you spend 10 minutes with your face turned sideways and your eyes watering, which is not a great start. The coal itself arrived last Tuesday on a truck that blocked the entire street for 20 minutes while Bert, the delivery man, who has a bad knee and will tell you about it, hauled the sacks around to the back. The coal goes into the bunker. The bunker is outside. Every morning you bring a scuttleful in, and every morning the scuttle is heavier than you remembered, and every morning you remember again. You are doing this before 5:30. The bunker door has a hinge that has never been right. The kitchen is the one warm place in the house, which means it is also the dining room, the laundry room, the drying room, and the room where you think. The bedrooms are cold. Not dramatically cold, just the kind of cold where the single-pane window has frost on the inside by January and the children sleep in their socks and the condensation on the glass runs in slow rivulets toward the sill. You have stopped noticing the frost. It has, in return, stopped apologizing. By the time the kettle boils, 45 minutes have passed since you got up, and nobody else is awake yet. You have removed ash, relayed the fire, brought coal, filled the kettle, and stood in an alley in the dark with the wind making itself known. This is the part that doesn't appear in the Ladies' Home Journal. The Ladies' Home Journal has a different morning. Hers has a bathrobe, soft lighting, and a percolator that seems to run on goodwill. Yours has soot on your wrist, and a kettle with a loose handle that lists slightly to the left. Now, the children. Tommy is 6, and will not get up without 3 attempts and the implied threat of cold porridge. The baby is 11 months and does not need to be woken up, because the baby is already awake and has been sending signals about this for some time. You pick her up with one arm. You stir the porridge with the other. This is not a metaphor. This is Tuesday. The tea is strong because weak tea is a waste of leaves and a waste of time, and you have neither. You drink it standing at the stove because sitting down at this point would be a tactical error, the chair would make its case, and you'd lose 4 minutes to the chair's argument. You know this. The chair also knows this. You don't sit down. You wake the children at 6 because they have to be at school by 9, and you have to be at the factory by 7:30. And the bedroom they share is at the back of the house where the fire never reaches. You stand in the doorway in your apron, and you say their names. They don't move. You say them again, more slowly. The eldest stirs first because she has always stirred first, and you start with her, and you work down through the rest in the order of who is least likely to argue. The cold in this room is not the poetic cold of a winter morning. It's the structural cold of a room that receives no heat and has single-pane windows that have been growing their own frost on the inside since around 2 in the morning. The youngest still has a hot water bottle from last night. which is now lukewarm and has migrated to the foot of the bed in a way that suggests he kicked it there sometime before dawn. You pick it up. It has the temperature of indifference, flat, tepid, and faintly accusatory. The dressing is a negotiation. You've laid the clothes out the night before, vests, knee socks, school shirts ironed on Sunday, and the children treat these garments as if they are mildly hostile strangers who have appeared without warning. The youngest won't do his buttons. The middle one has lost a shoe that was definitely on the floor last night and is somehow not on the floor now. The eldest stands very still and allows herself to be dressed with the measured dignity of someone enduring a minor inconvenience she considers beneath her. She is 8. Breakfast is bread. Sometimes it's bread with margarine. Sometimes it's bread with margarine and a thin scrape of jam if the jar is not yet threatening to run out, which it usually is. You make porridge when there's time, which there isn't today. The children eat standing near the range because the kitchen table is being used for the ironing you didn't finish last night, and no one has the energy to negotiate this. You drink your tea while supervising the eating, the button fastening, and a minor territorial dispute about the placement of a school satchel. You do not sit down. Sitting is for later, which is another way of saying never. The arithmetic is honest. You have to leave for the factory at 7:15 to make the gates by 7:30. School doesn't start until 9. That gap, an hour and 45 minutes, does not take care of itself. Missus. Doris Clegg from the house across the alley takes the younger two until 8:30, when her daughter walks them to the infant school gate on her way to work at the hosiery. The eldest goes on her own because she is old enough, which in 1952 means she is 8. The arrangement works. It works right up until Missus Clegg has one of her bad weeks, and then it does not work at all, and you spend your morning break at the factory worrying through the noise of the machines. A 1956 survey out of Detroit found that about 40% of working mothers with children under 6 relied on relatives for care, and around 15% relied on a sibling under 14. The sibling under 14, in Missus Clegg's house, is her daughter Ruth, who is 12 and walks Tommy and the baby down Croft Street with one hand on the pram and the other on Tommy's coat collar. The survey did not call Ruth a caregiver. It called her the responsible child. Ruth got the title. Ruth did not get paid. Ruth got a slice of bread and dripping in Mrs. Clegg's kitchen, and on Fridays a penny for the gas meter. You've done the calculation so many times it no longer feels like a calculation. Your wages, 32 shillings a week on the assembly line, go into the tin behind the flour. The rent top-up comes out Monday. The coal club comes out Wednesday. The school dinner money goes into a brown envelope on Friday morning. 4 shillings is what's left. Your husband's wages cover the rest, in theory, except that the median male wage in 1950 doesn't actually cover a family of 4 in most cities without the second income, which is why you put on the apron and the headscarf and went to the factory in the first place. The 1952 survey said 60% of people believed women with jobs were damaging their families. The 60% were not the ones paying for the coal. The children are dressed. They are fed. The middle one has found the shoe, which was inside the school bag, which explains everything and nothing. You push their hair flat with your hand and send them toward Missus Clegg's door with the specific urgency of someone who has 4 minutes to get her coat on. The eldest turns back at the gate and looks at you in a way that is not quite a wave and not quite an accusation. You wave. You put your coat on. The kitchen fire is banked and holding. The porridge pot is soaking in the sink. You go. You spread dripping on bread for the lunch pails and margarine on toast for the table. The porridge is on the back of the stove from where you set it before the coal caught, and the kettle is on the front, and the children's milk is in a jug because the bottle won't go round 4 cups. You serve in the order of who has to leave first. You don't sit. The husband eats at the table, and the children eat at the table, and you eat what's left, and you eat it standing at the counter. The dripping is not a garnish. It's the plan. Beef dripping, the solidified fat from whatever roast came through the house last Sunday, if a roast came through the house, is spread cold and thick on bread for the lunch pails because it is calorie-dense and free, in the sense that it costs nothing beyond already having bought the beef, which you didn't, because beef was rationed until 1954, so this is probably pork, or it's the memory of pork. You smooth it with the back of a spoon and it leaves a grey-white sheen on the bread like the world's least festive frosting. An orange at Christmas counts as the year's fruit. The dripping is not a fruit. The porridge stretches 4 ways and then not quite 4 ways. You gave the littlest one a bigger portion because she looked thin at dinner last night, which means someone else got less, and that someone is you, and you ate it with a look of absolute unconcern, as though you had simply decided not to be hungry this morning as a personal lifestyle choice. Nutritionally speaking, this is a meal designed by someone doing long division under time pressure. It covers the requirements of getting to noon without fainting, and that's the brief. The brief is met. The kettle is the one appliance in this kitchen with genuine institutional authority. It boils when it boils. It doesn't hurry. You make the first pot strong and the second pot with the same leaves, which produces something the colour of a used envelope, pale, weary, and faintly resigned. You drink the second pot. The first pot is for the table, which is for the people leaving the house to earn money, which is a category that technically includes you but functionally does not include you yet, because you haven't left yet, because you're still standing at the counter. Mrs. Phyllis Hargrove, your neighbour 2 houses down, who has done the same morning in her kitchen for 11 years and whose hands match yours scar for scar, once described the breakfast hour as organised forgetting. You forget to sit. You forget to eat enough. You forget to pour yourself the first cup. The forgetting isn't accidental. There isn't enough to go around, and everyone in the room knows it, and the forgetting is how you all agree not to discuss it. Phyllis says this while cutting the crusts off 2 sandwiches with the focused precision of a surgeon and putting the crusts on her own plate. The crusts have somewhere to be. The margarine costs less than butter by about 4p, and it spreads cold without tearing the bread if you've left it near the stove overnight, and it tastes like butter's more practical cousin who went into accounting. The children don't know the difference yet, which is one of the minor mercies built into being 6. By 12 they'll know. You know. The margarine tub sits on the counter with an air of quiet resignation, doing its best. You pack the lunch pails in the order you'll hand them out. Husband's first, bread with dripping, a scraping of pickle if there's any, a cold potato wrapped in paper. The children's next. Porridge is gone, so it's bread and margarine and a cup of tea in a flask if you have a flask. And you do, barely, because the top is cracked and it's held together with a wrap of cloth. You've retied so many times. The cloth has its own muscle memory. You close each pail with a click that sounds more certain than you feel about any of this. The kitchen is warm. That's the thing about coal fires and small kitchens and 6 people in an 800 square foot house. The morning generates heat as a byproduct of chaos, and for about 20 minutes after everyone is gone, you stand in the one warm room in the building and finish the second pot tea and eat the heel of the bread. You don't sit down even now. Sitting down takes longer to get back up from, and you have a bus to catch in 11 minutes. You keep the ration book in the drawer beside the rent envelope, and you take it out on Thursday, and you count the meat coupons, and you count them again, because the butcher in 1953 has been counting them too, and has opinions about which households use them well. Sugar came off ration 2 years ago. Tea came off last month. Meat will not come off until July of next year, but you don't know that yet. You only know that the page is short and that Sunday wants more from it than Sunday is going to get. The butcher's name is Mr. Dowd, and he has a way of holding the coupon book up to the light that suggests he is examining evidence rather than processing your weekly shop. He tears the coupon along the perforated line with the gravity of a man performing surgery. Slow, deliberate, and quietly theatrical. You wait. He wraps the piece, not the cut, the piece, singular, in brown paper that immediately begins to go translucent at the corners. You tuck it under your arm like something valuable, which it is. The piece is roughly 7 ounces of beef shin, which is the snoozatorian way of saying it is mostly collagen and ambition. You can do things with 7 ounces. You've been doing things with 7 ounces since 1941. The trick is a pot, a long afternoon, and the conviction that vegetables belong in supporting roles rather than starring ones. You add an onion. You add what the onion persuades you counts as a carrot. You add water, and you tell yourself it's stock, and the pot doesn't argue with you about this. The arithmetic in 1953 is doing a lot of work nobody acknowledges. The median male wage in Britain this year is somewhere under £14 a week. Rent takes 3. Coal takes 1 and 6 in winter, more when the cold sits. The grocer is on standing credit, which means Friday is both payday and a small reckoning. What's left for meat is what's left after everything else has finished being something else first. The ration book isn't an inconvenience, it's a scaffolding. It gives the week a shape it wouldn't otherwise have. Across the Atlantic, things are technically less rationed, but not, in practice, more plentiful. The American working-class housewife in 1953 is not navigating a coupon book, but she is navigating a budget with approximately the same structural generosity as a parking ticket. The U.S. median male wage sits around $3,400 a year, which sounds like money until you divide it by rent, coal, shoes for 3 children, and the part where someone gets sick. Hamburger is the protein. Tin sardines are the backup protein. An egg is a plan B. An egg that breaks is a tragedy that will not be discussed but will be noted. Mrs. Ida Sutcliffe down the street, who came over from Barbados in 1951 and has been cleaning houses in Wolverhampton since before she unpacked her second bag, takes her ration book to a different butcher on the other side of the high street because the closer one has a way of finding that certain cuts are spoken for by the time she arrives. She knows this. He knows she knows this. The brown paper is the same. The coupon is worth the same amount. The walk is longer. Sunday dinner is the meal the week is organised around, which means it is also the meal that bears the full weight of everything the week couldn't provide. You put the pot on at 11. You don't lift the lid until 2, because the lid has nothing encouraging to report before 2. The children can smell it, and for approximately 4 hours your home smells like a home that has its situation under control. It is a very specific smell. It requires almost no actual meat to produce it. The onion is doing most of the talking. You set the table. You serve the children first. You give your husband the piece from the middle of the pot, which is the best piece, which everyone at the table is aware of and nobody says. You take the edge of the bowl, the part where the broth has pooled and cooled slightly and the potato has started to lose its structural argument. You eat standing. Not because there's no chair. There is a chair. You are just already standing, and sitting down feels like announcing something. You shop every day because the cupboard is small and the larder is smaller and a budget with no margin survives only on small increments. You go to the butcher, who knows your husband's wage to the shilling. You go to the greengrocer, who knows which apples have been on the tray the longest. You go to the corner store, which keeps a slate behind the counter, and your name is on the slate, and the slate is paid Friday, and Friday is 3 days away. The slate is not a convenience. It is a social contract with witnesses. Mrs. Hennessy at the corner shop has been running slates since before the war, and she writes in pencil, not pen, which everyone pretends is generosity and is actually just practicality. You hand over 6pence toward what you owe. She adjusts the number without looking up. You both know the number. Neither of you says it out loud. The shelves don't match the adverts, no gleaming tins, no cheerful labels, no aspic moulds that look like something a hotel would serve. You buy bread. You buy dripping, which is the fat skimmed from whatever was last roasted, kept in a white ceramic bowl with a dark layer at the bottom that smells like Sunday 2 weeks ago, savoury, mineral, and faintly archaeological. You buy a tin of sardines, which will stretch across 2 meals if you are careful, and 1 meal if the children get there first. An orange, at Christmas, that counts as the year's fruit. The tin of sardines has a key. The key snaps off. It always snaps off. The greengrocer's name is Mr. Fenwick, and he lifts the cabbage with 2 hands, as though presenting evidence. He knows which cabbages have been there since Tuesday and which came in this morning, and he will give you a Tuesday cabbage without comment if you're a regular, and without apology if you're not. You take the cabbage. You do not negotiate. Negotiation is for the market on Saturday, when there's time, and today there is no time because there is never time. The mathematics of the daily shop runs entirely in your head, which is basically a spreadsheet, except the spreadsheet has to account for the coal club payment on Saturday and the tallyman on Wednesday, and shame is the overdraft fee. You know, without writing it down, that you have 1 shilling and 4pence left until Friday, that the bread will be gone by tomorrow morning, and that if you buy the slightly better cut of cheese instead of the end-rind piece, Mrs. Hennessy keeps under the counter. You will not be able to pay the full slate amount, and Mrs. Hennessy will write a smaller number in pencil, and neither of you will discuss what that means. You buy the end rind. So, Vaseline enters the picture next, not as a metaphor but as an actual object in your actual bag, because Vaseline is the working-class household's universal substance, chapped lips from the wind, the children's heels in winter, a light coating over whatever's dry, which is everything. You buy a small tin at Woolworths when the current one runs out, which happens in the middle of other things and is never the primary errand but is always the necessary one. The daily shop takes longer than it should because the daily shop is also the daily debrief. Missus Tully from the end house catches you at the greengrocer's and tells you the doctor's surgery on Croft Street has moved its Thursday hours, which matters because you've been putting off a visit about the cough that started in November and is now March. The doctor visit costs 3 shillings. 3 shillings is half a day's wages at the mill. The cough continues to have opinions about this calculation. By the time you're back, it's past 11. The bread needs slicing, the coal needs banking. The children will be home by 3:30. You set the sardines on the shelf with the economy of someone who has arranged the same shelf 400 times and knows exactly how much space a tin does and does not take. It takes very little space. That is the point of it. You bring home a pound of mince on Monday, and you turn it into shepherd's pie for 6 on Tuesday, and you turn what's left of the shepherd's pie into rissoles on Wednesday, and the ham bone from Sunday is still in the stock pot, and the stock pot will be soup on Thursday, and the base of a stew on Friday. You don't think of this as a skill. You don't think of it at all. It is simply what you do, with a pound of mince, and a week. Meat rationing in the UK didn't end until July 1954. The war it was rationed for ended in 1945. The math there is its own kind of editorial comment, and it requires no elaboration. For most of the early 50s, your family's weekly meat allocation arrives on a ration book coupon, and it is small, and you hold it in both hands like something that might evaporate, which in a hot pan it basically does. The mince is the workhorse. The mince goes further than anything else. The mince has never once let you down, which is more than you can say for the stockpot lid, which fits imperfectly and steams the cupboard door above it into a slow warp. Protein, in the technical sense of what you actually have access to, tinned sardines, an egg if you can stretch to it, bread and dripping. The dripping is the rendered fat from whatever meat was cooked last, and it is not a poverty signal. It is Tuesday lunch, and it is fine, and the children eat it without complaint because they don't know yet that it is supposed to be a poverty signal. Fruit is a seasonal guest, rare, brief, and reliably ceremonial. An apple in October counts as a windfall in both senses of the word, and it gets divided 4 ways with the gravity of a will reading. Dorothy, your neighbour's mother-in-law, drops in on Thursday afternoons with half a tin of condensed milk she didn't finish, setting it on your kitchen table with the gravity of a woman presenting a legal document. She doesn't say anything. You don't say anything. The condensed milk goes into the pudding. This is the economy of women who live near each other and pay attention, and it operates entirely without paperwork. The stock pot sits on the back ring of the stove for 3 days running, doing its quiet work, and the smell of it in a kitchen where the windows don't fully seal is a specific kind of warmth. Not a pleasant warmth, exactly, but an occupied warmth, the smell of a house that is managing. You skim the top in the mornings. You add water when the level drops. You never fully empty it. The stock pot is less a vessel and more an ongoing project with a bone in it. The butter goes last. You scrape the dish down to the ceramic before you open a new one, which you do with the flat of a knife and the patience of someone who has never once wasted a scraping in her life. Lard does the job for frying. Margarine does the job for spreading, and it does that job with very little enthusiasm, but it does it. The household runs on a series of things doing the job of other things. Margarine doing the job of butter, lard doing the job of margarine, dripping doing the job of lard, a greasy chain of substitution that descends in prestige and rises in practicality. The skill isn't in the recipe. You don't really use a recipe, because a recipe assumes fixed inputs, and your inputs change every week depending on what the corner shop has on the slate and what Mr. Fenwick was willing to put aside and whether your husband's wages came home intact on Friday or stopped briefly at the pub on the way. The skill is in the adjustment. You look at what you have, and you make something from it that your children will eat sitting down at a table, and then you do it again the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. It is not glamorous. It is not on the cover of any magazine. It is the most sophisticated logistical operation in the house, and nobody has ever called it that out loud. You rise before 6 on Monday because Monday is wash day, and wash day is older than you are, and the entire week is arranged around it. The copper tub is in the scullery. The fire under it has to be lit before anyone wakes, because the water has to boil before the shirts go in, because the shirts have to be on the line before the morning has gone too far. You roll your sleeves to the elbow, The water is not yet warm. The first basket is at your feet. The whites go in first because the water is cleanest at the start, and clean water is a resource you are managing, not a given. After the whites come the coloureds, then the work things, then whatever is left that you'd rather not think about too closely. The lye soap comes in a block. It doesn't smell of lavender. It smells of lye soap, which is a category unto itself, somewhere between institutional and geological. You grate it into the water and the steam rises and the scullery becomes, briefly, the warmest room in the house. This is the closest thing to a spa the morning offers. The washboard is leaned against the side of the tub. You've had it for 6 years. It has a slight lean to the left now, which you've accommodated without thinking about it. Olive next door swears by a double scrub on the collar before the board, which you've tried, and which works, and which you've never told her you're doing because she'd make it a whole thing. The soap suds are grey by the time the third shirt is done. Your hands are red by the time the first. The mangle stands at the end of the scullery with the attitude of something that has been in the family longer than anyone will admit, heavy, opinionated, and quietly proprietary. You feed a shirt through the wringers and crank the handle, and the wringer squeezes the water out in a flat sheet that hits the basin below with a sound like a slow judgment. The mangle has opinions about buttons. Not preferences, opinions. A button fed in wrong does not survive the encounter. You know this. You have been told this by the mangle directly, on 7 separate occasions. You feed each button through on the diagonal now, which works well enough that you no longer count it as a compromise. The morning branches here. If it's not raining, you carry the basket to the line. If it's raining, the sheets go over the clothes horse by the fire, and the whole house spends the afternoon smelling like damp wool and good intentions. During the 1952 London smog, 4 days in December when the air was essentially solid, women hung their washing indoors regardless, because anything left on an outdoor line for an hour came back in wearing a visible grey film. The smog killed 4,000 people in those 4 days. The laundry was still due on Monday. These things were not considered related. Your hands by 10 o'clock have what your mother called the wash red, a deep raw flush from the wrists to the first knuckles that takes until Wednesday to fully fade. The skin between your fingers cracks in winter. Vaseline goes in those cracks before bed. The same Vaseline that goes on the baby's rash, on your lips in February, on the stuck drawer in the kitchen. Vaseline is not a product in this house. It is a position. Margaret from 2 doors down finishes her wash day by 11. You don't know how. You've watched her line and counted her pieces and run the arithmetic, and it doesn't come out. She might be washing on Sunday, which is either impressive or a private rebellion, depending on who you ask. Nobody asks. The snug at the Crown on Thursday nights is where most of the neighbourhood's operational intelligence gets processed, including this. And the consensus is that Margaret has a system she isn't sharing, and the consensus is fine with that, because the snug runs on similar principles. The last load finishes just before noon. The tub water is the colour of old pewter. You don't empty it yet. It can wait until after lunch, when your back has had 20 minutes to remember it's attached to the rest of you. The shirts are on the line. The work things are on the line. The Monday smell, which is steam and lye and the faint iron note of the copper tub, is already starting to cool in the scullery. It'll be back in 7 days. It is always back in 7 days. You begin heating water on Saturday afternoon because the tub is going to need 6 kettles and a saucepan and the boiler emptied twice. The tub is tin. It lives behind the door in the scullery, and you drag it into the kitchen and set it in front of the fire, where the floorboards have been worn pale by the same drag. The children bathe in order from cleanest to grubbiest. The water is changed once, halfway through, when nobody's looking. You bathe last. The order isn't random. The cleanest child goes first because the water is hot and clean, and this is the only moment in the week when the water is both of those things simultaneously. By the third child, the temperature has dropped to something best described as committed lukewarm. By the fourth, there is a thin grey film on the surface that you do not examine closely. Nobody says anything about this. It is the contract. The tub itself has a personality. It is tin, cold, and reliably unimpressed. The tin conducts cold from the floor faster than the fire can warm the water from above, so the bottom of the tub is always slightly chillier than expected, and every child registers this with the same sharp inhale, as if the tub is meeting them personally and expressing a mild opinion. You've filled it perhaps 200 times in your life. You know the opinion. It hasn't changed. Meanwhile, you manage the fire. Too low, and the last two kettles of water go in cooler than they should. Too high, and the kitchen becomes a sauna, and the children get overheated and cranky, and the baby, who goes second to last and is too young to understand the order, starts crying, which sets off the second youngest, which is the specific sound that makes your left eye twitch. You manage this. You always manage this. Mrs. Dunbar from the next street uses a wooden clothes rack draped with a towel to create what she calls a drying screen. It blocks the draft from the hallway and keeps the bath heat in. She showed you this once, with the focused pride of someone who has solved a problem nobody else thought to solve. You've been doing it with a chair and an old coat for 11 years. The coat works. The coat knows its job. Your own bath comes after the children are in bed. The water by then is the temperature of a tepid apology and the colour of something you'd find at the bottom of a flower vase. You get in anyway. This is the only time in the week, the only time, when nobody is asking you anything. The fire has died to embers. The house is quiet. The tub does not ask you anything either, which is the closest it comes to being generous. The soap is a block of sunlight, the same soap from Monday's wash, which means your bath smells somewhat like laundry. This doesn't bother you anymore. You can't remember when it stopped bothering you, which is probably information about something, but you're too tired to follow that thought anywhere. You dry off with a towel that has been warming on the rail by the fire, which is genuinely one of the better sensations of the week. Warm towel. Quiet house. Embers. For about 4 minutes on a Saturday night, everything is fine. Then you carry the tub back to the scullery, empty it in the sink in 3 trips with a jug, hang the damp towels, bank the fire for the night, check on the children, and go to bed, where you will lie still for approximately 90 seconds before you remember that you forgot to soak the porridge oats. The oats are soaking. You soaked them before the first kettle. You knew you would forget, so you did it early. This is what the week teaches you, eventually. Do the thing before you forget it. The forgetting is coming regardless. You wipe the mantelpiece every morning because coal dust settles on the mantelpiece every night, and the children's hands find it before breakfast, and the cloth comes away grey. You wipe the windowsill. You wipe the picture frame. You wipe the inside of the curtain hem where it brushes the floor. The dust is not your husband's fault. Not exactly, because the dust is in the air of the street the moment you open the door, and the door has to be opened, because the day has to be let in. The coal comes on Tuesdays. A man with forearms the colour of graphite tips a 100-weight sack down the cellar chute, and the sound travels through the floor like a small, underground announcement. You sign the book. The book goes back in his jacket. The dust from the delivery settles on the surfaces you wiped that morning. You don't say anything because there's nothing to say and because he's gone before the cloud clears. The coal costs you time, not shillings. The fire doesn't light itself. The fire has never, not once, lit itself. You're down before 6 with newspaper, kindling, and the small brass shovel that lives by the grate and has developed a slight warp from years of opinion. You crumple the paper into the shape the draft needs. You lay the kindling the way your mother showed you, which is the way her mother showed her, which is the way every woman on this street was shown by a woman who was also up before 6. The whole process takes 45 minutes on a good morning. On a damp morning, the paper goes limp and you start again. The ash from yesterday has to come out before any of this happens. You carry it in the metal bucket, careful, because yesterday's ash can hold heat for hours, which the bucket discovered the hard way and has the scorch mark to prove it. You tip it into the dustbin in the yard. Your hands are grey by 6:15. The water in the basin is cold. You wash your hands, dry them on the cloth, and begin breakfast. Outside in the yard, the morning is already busy with itself. The milkman's electric float hums 2 streets over. The dustbin lids clatter. Someone 2 doors down is having the same argument with their own fire, and you can hear the newspaper tearing through the brick. In November, the kitchen window fogs with condensation from the morning porridge pot, while frost is still forming on the inside of the front room pane. The kitchen is the one warm room. Everything else is the temperature of a polite apology. In December 1952, London spent 4 days inside a yellow-grey fog so thick that buses stopped mid-route because the drivers couldn't see the bonnet. Roughly 4,000 people died in those 4 days. 12,000 more would die in the months following, from respiratory complications that arrived quietly and stayed. You don't know any of this yet because the official figure won't be released for years and will be released at a lower number. What you know is that your chest is tight, your youngest is coughing, and the laundry you hung on the outdoor line came back in an hour later with a visible grey film across the sheets. You brought it back inside. You hung it from the ceiling rack in the kitchen, which was already damp with kettle steam, and the sheets dried slowly and smelled of coal and wet cotton and the specific texture of the 1950s. Missus. Holt on your road has a system for the smog weeks. She stuffs a damp cloth along the bottom of the front door, the way you'd draft-proof against cold. She does it every evening with the matter-of-factness of someone making tea. The cloth comes away thick, dark, and politely accusatory. She doesn't remark on it. She rinses it, wrings it out over the yard drain, and hangs it by the door again for the following night. It isn't a solution. It is a gesture in the direction of a solution, which is the most available option. The surfaces get clean, and then they get dirty. The fire gets lit, and then it goes out. The ash gets carried, and then it accumulates. By 6:15 tomorrow you will wipe the mantelpiece again, and the cloth will come away grey, and your hands will be grey before the kettle has finished its first complaint. You put on the slip first because the slip goes on without thinking. You put on the girdle next, and the girdle takes thinking, and the hooks are at the back where you cannot see them and have to do by feel. The stockings go on after the girdle because the girdle holds them, and the stockings are mended twice along the seam at the back of the calf where they always go first. You step into the dress. You smooth the front. You check the back in the small mirror nailed to the door. The dress is cotton. It cost 14 shillings at Woolworths, and it looks it, which is not a complaint, just a fact the dress has come to terms with. You have two like it. One is for work, one is for not work. The difference between them is a pocket and a small grease stain that refuses to leave the hem of the not work one, no matter what you have tried, and you have tried quite a lot. Underneath the dress goes the full slip, because the fabric is thin enough to be honest about that, and the girdle, because the girdle is not optional. Nobody told you it wasn't optional. You simply know. The girdle is boned, hooked, and quietly unforgiving. It is boned at the sides and hooks at the back, and has a relationship with your rib cage that could generously be called complicated. It holds your stockings up via 4 small suspenders that clip to the welt and come unclipped at exactly the worst moments, which is to say, at work, on the bus, while carrying something. The girdle is not uncomfortable in the way that requires mentioning. It is uncomfortable in the way that is simply the texture of being dressed. You have worn one since you were 16. Your body has adapted. The girdle has not. The stockings are nylon and they cost 1 and 6, and they will last approximately 11 days before the left one goes at the toe, as it always goes at the toe. You have a small tin of clear nail varnish on the windowsill, which is not for your nails. It is for the run, applied the moment you catch it. A tiny desperate dam against the inevitable. Dot Pierce, who works the next machine over, dabs hers on during the lunch break with the focused expression of a field medic. She's lost 3 pairs this month. The nail varnish tin has a dent in it from being dropped in a hurry. Now, the hair. You set it last night on rollers that left red pressure marks along your scalp, because that is the price of a wave that lasts until Thursday. You brush it out, pin 2 sides, apply a small amount of Vaseline to the ends to stop the frizz, which does stop the frizz, and also your hair now has a faint petroleum smell that you have decided is undetectable at conversational distance. You have decided correctly, mostly. The clothes you are not wearing this morning cost more than the clothes you are wearing by an amount that isn't worth calculating. A genuine new look dress, the kind in the magazine propped against the bread tin, ran to £30 or £40 ready-made, which is more than a month's wages, and an authentic Dior was roughly £300, which is the equivalent of not existing as a purchasing possibility. It was not a dress. It was an argument about who the decade was for. You filed it and moved on. You do own one good thing. It is a brooch, dark enamel, slightly chipped on the back where it doesn't show, that you bought from a market stall in 1949 for 2pence, and have worn to every occasion that qualified as an occasion since. You pin it to the collar now. The dress straightens up a little. The whole arrangement achieves something. Not the magazine, not the movie, but something you can walk out the door in, which is what you need it to be. You catch the bus at the corner of your street at 7:15, and the bus is full of women in house dresses with shopping bags on their laps and lunch pails between their feet. You stand if there are men sitting, and there are usually men sitting, because the bus picks the men up 2 stops earlier. The conductor knows your fare and your stop and the day you started, which was 6 years ago this March, and he never asks. He just nods. He stamps your card. The factory floor opens at 8. You're clocked in by 7:50 because 3 minutes late is a formal warning, and 2 formal warnings is a conversation with Mr. Briggs and a conversation with Mr. Briggs takes 11 minutes you do not have. The time clock is a flat grey box mounted by the door, and it has never once been wrong in your favour. Its opinions are strong, consistent, and one-directional. In 1950, the average woman on a US manufacturing floor earns 63 cents an hour. The man at the next machine earns $1.34. Same machine, same parts, same quota. The difference is entirely legal, printed in no document you were ever shown, and will remain entirely legal for another 13 years. You know this the way you know the bus schedule, not because anyone told you, but because you've been living inside it long enough to memorize the shape. The bathroom is the other half of the arithmetic. You don't go when you need to. You go when the supervisor decides you may, which is not the same time and is sometimes not at all. The supervisor is almost always a man. He stands at the end of the row with a clipboard, and when you raise your hand, he looks at his watch first, then at you, then back at his watch, as if the watch might change its mind. Sometimes it does. You wait. The line keeps moving. Your hands keep working. You have learned, over 6 years, to want very little and to schedule it precisely. Now, the women around you are not strangers. There's a woman 2 machines down named Brenda Fisk who has been here since 1944 and can assemble her quota in 4 hours if no one is watching. She once timed herself. She told no one official. She has 3 kids at home and a husband on nights, which means she is always either arriving somewhere or leaving it, and the in-between is this floor. And this floor is, in its way, the quietest part of her day. That is either comforting or alarming, depending on how you look at it. The air on a textile floor in the Carolinas is not air in any technical sense. It's fibre. The cotton mills run hot, above 90 degrees in summer, because the thread snaps if it gets dry, and the women don't. So the adjustment is not made for the women. The lint hangs in the light like something decorative. It isn't. Years of it settle in the lungs in a specific way that doctors eventually name byssinosis, though in 1952 most of them call it chest trouble, which is a phrase that covers a great deal without committing to anything. Lunch is at your station. 30 minutes. A sandwich in wax paper, bread and a scrape of something if it's been a good week, bread if it hasn't. Dot Pierce from the previous stop is 4 rows over, and she eats standing up because sitting makes her back seize. She nods at you across the floor with the composure of a woman who has made her peace with linoleum. You nod back. This is friendship. It fits in 30 minutes and requires no explanation. By 1960, women are 34% of the entire American paid labor force, 23 million women. On the bus at 7:15, at the clock-in by 7:50, at the machine by 8. None of this appears in the Ladies' Home Journal survey from 1952, which found that 60% of respondents believed a married woman with a job was damaging her family. The 60% were not wrong about what they'd been told. They were just describing a different woman than you, a woman who could afford to stay home, which is a woman you have never met on this bus. You sit at the long bench at 7:30 and pick up the iron, and you solder 12 circuit joints a minute for 8 hours with 2 breaks of 15 minutes each, and the woman to your left has been on this bench since the war, and the woman to your right has been on it for 3 weeks and is still slow. You don't talk on the line. You can talk in the cloakroom. There are 9 hours between the cloakrooms, and the woman to your right doesn't yet know which conversations belong to which one. The bench itself is about 6 feet wide and runs the full length of the room, which is long enough that the women at the far end are more of a concept than a presence. 32 women on a shift. Same iron, same solder, same 12 joints a minute give or take, because the line has a rhythm and the rhythm doesn't ask how you slept. The components come down the line in small grey trays. The trays do not have opinions about your breakfast or your rent or the fact that your youngest had a cough all night. The trays just keep arriving. Your hands are not burned, exactly. There's a technique. You learn it in the first week or you learn it in the hospital, and most women learn it in the first week. The iron sits at a specific angle. Your wrist stays loose. After 3 months, the motion is so embedded it runs slightly ahead of your attention, which means you can think about something else entirely, while 12 joints a minute happen at the end of your arm. The drift is automatic, accurate, and quietly unnerving. Some women call it the drift. Some women don't call it anything. It's just Tuesday. The woman to your left is Margaret Coyle. She sets her iron down at break with the practiced gentleness of someone who has made peace with a difficult roommate. She brings her lunch in a tin with a clasp that has been rebent twice and still doesn't quite close, and she eats the same thing every day, which is bread and a scraping of something, and she doesn't comment on this. Margaret knows which forewoman is running a light schedule on Thursdays. Margaret knows who the nurse is, and when she actually comes in versus when she's listed as available. This is information Margaret distributes in the cloakroom, and it is worth considerably more than 12 joints a minute. The pay envelope arrives on Friday. Yours says $24.80 for the week. The man 3 stations over in the assembly section, his envelope says something closer to 50 for work that is not, by any observable measurement, twice as difficult. This has been true since before Margaret came to the bench. It will be true after you leave it. The Equal Pay Act is 13 years away, which in bench time is approximately 27 million joints. Now, the breaks. 15 minutes. The cloakroom smells like talcum powder and cigarette smoke and the specific anxiety of not having quite enough time to do everything that needs doing. Someone is redoing a hem by hand. Someone else is checking a piece of paper that might be a bill or might be a note from school. 2 women near the lockers are having a conversation in a register so low and fast it sounds like a single long sentence. And whatever the sentence is, both of them leave looking slightly less tense. The cloakroom is doing a lot of work for a room that officially exists only for coats. You're back on the bench before the second hand finishes its thought. The line doesn't restart, it never stopped, it was just waiting for you to rejoin it. The trays keep coming. 12 joints a minute is 720 an hour, which is 5,040 before the shift whistle, which adds up to a number large enough that you stopped counting sometime in the first month and decided the counting was not the point. The point is the envelope on Friday. The point is the bus home. The point is that Margaret, who has been here since the war and is steady as a coal stove in January, once told you that the trick to the bench is not thinking of it as the bench. She didn't say what to think of it as instead. You're still working on that. You work the weaving floor in the cotton mill, where the temperature is held above 90 in August, so the thread will not break and the air is full of lint. And the lint is fine enough to settle on the inside of your eyelashes and the inside of your collar and the inside of your chest. The cough is normal. Everyone on the floor coughs. The doctors call it brown lung when they call it anything, and they do not call it anything to your face. You wipe your eyes. You go back to the loom. The noise is the second thing, after the heat. The looms run at a volume that makes conversation impossible, which means the women on the floor have developed a complete parallel language of hand signals, lip movements, and eyebrow positions that would take a linguist 6 months to decode, and a forewoman about 4 seconds to decide she doesn't like. You learn it in your first week. You are fluent by your third. There is a specific gesture for the thread snapped again, a different one for bathroom, and a third one, subtle, executed near the hip. That means the foreman is coming and he is in a mood. The lint isn't decorative. It isn't the kind of thing that floats pleasantly through a sunbeam. It moves like weather, fine, weightless, and reliably everywhere. It coats the floor, the machinery, the women, the inside of the windowsills. By the end of a shift, your hair has it, your forearms have it, and something in your chest has decided to hold on to it permanently as a souvenir. Bisonosis takes years to announce itself properly, which is convenient for everyone except the person it's happening to. The chest tightness that hits on Monday mornings, worst at the start of the week, oddly bearable by Friday, is the body telling you something the foreman's intake paperwork would very much prefer you not to know. Dorothy Spence works the loom directly to your left. She's been here 11 years and she moves through the machinery the way a person moves through their own kitchen, automatic, unhurried, one eye always somewhere else. She doesn't need to look at the thread to know when it's about to break. Her hands know. She checks the tension with 2 fingers the way a doctor checks a pulse, then adjusts something small and keeps moving. Dorothy does not cough the Monday cough anymore. She has the Tuesday cough, the Wednesday cough, the Thursday cough. She has resolved the cough into a permanent condition with no particular day of the week attached to it. The heat is intentional. Above 90, the thread holds. Below it, the thread snaps, the loom stops, the production number drops, and the production number is the only number anyone in management is genuinely interested in. You are not the thread. You are the conditions under which the thread performs well. This is, in its way, a very clear statement of priorities. Your wage for this is 63 cents an hour. The man who repairs the looms when they break, who is in the building perhaps 2 hours on a busy day, earns more than double that and has not once in recorded history been asked to hold a bathroom break until a convenient moment. The Equal Pay Act is 13 years away. 13 years is a long time to hold it. There's no air, not technically. There are windows, high and narrow, and in August they are open, and what comes through them is more August. The Carolina summer does not refresh. It participates. It adds itself to the lint and the noise and the heat and sits there, contributing. By 2 in the afternoon, the floor smells like hot cotton and 35 women who have been working since 6. And the smell has opinions about the situation that no one has asked for. You don't complain about the cough. Complaining about the cough is the kind of thing that gets noted quietly by people whose job is to note things quietly. The cough is occupational. The cough is also invisible on any form you've ever signed. What the form says is that you have reviewed the safety conditions and found them satisfactory, and what you said when you signed it was nothing, because you needed the job and the job needed you to have found the conditions satisfactory. The form has been very satisfied with this arrangement for years. You earn 63 cents an hour for the work you do, and the man at the next bench, doing the same work with the same tools at the same speed, earns $1.34. This is not a secret. The pay rates are posted on the notice board in the canteen, and the notice board does not lie, and the canteen is where everyone eats. The Equal Pay Act will not exist for another 13 years, and you don't know that yet. You only know the notice board, and what it says about the man, and what it says about you. The factory floor you're on today isn't cotton. It's an electronics assembly plant in Ohio, or a garment works in New Jersey, or a light manufacturing shed outside Birmingham. The work varies. The notice board does not. The man whose bench faces yours across the aisle is named Frank. Frank arrives at 7:20. Frank leaves at 4:30. Frank does what you do at the speed at which you do it, and on Friday Frank's envelope is heavier than yours by exactly the difference between 63 cents and $1.34 times 40. Frank knows. Frank has never raised the matter. The bathroom is the next problem. You need to use it. You will need to ask permission to use it from a supervisor who is almost certainly a man, who controls a clipboard, who decides whether your need is urgent enough to justify the disruption to the line. Some supervisors are reasonable, some are not. The ones who are not will tell you to hold it, and you will hold it, because the alternative is docking. Your kidneys are not a labor relations priority. The clipboard is watchful, particular, and reliably unmoved. Meanwhile, the man at the next bench does not ask. He goes. He comes back. He earns $1.34. The math is genuinely instructive. If you work 40 hours a week at 63 cents, you take home $25.20 before deductions. A week's groceries for a family of 4 runs about $12 to $15 in 1952. Rent on a 2-room flat takes another 8 to 10. That leaves you approximately nothing, which is approximately what the system intended to leave you, and the system has a very good track record. A woman named Peggy Kowalski, 3rd station from the left, the one who tapes a picture of her kids to the inside of her locker door, brings her lunch every day. 2 slices of white bread with butter and a thermos of tea. She does this not because she prefers it, but because the canteen hot lunch costs 30 cents, and 30 cents is 30 cents. Peggy does the math in her head. She does it in the morning before anyone else is awake. She has been doing it for 4 years, and she is very fast at it now. Marriage by the mid-50s is generally acceptable here. Pregnancy is not. Pregnancy is an automatic dismissal at most plants, which is basically a non-compete clause, except the thing you are competing against is your own body. You don't announce it as long as you can manage not to. The coat stays on a little longer. You adjust the station stool. You buy time. The job itself isn't the worst thing you've done this week. It's structured. There are walls and a roof, which puts it ahead of field work. There are other women, which puts it ahead of domestic service. The women talk when the supervisor isn't watching, and when he is watching, they develop a fluency in not talking that is its own form of communication, a raised eyebrow, a very specific way of setting down a component, a cough that means something different from an ordinary cough. Dorothy would recognize the system immediately. Different floor, same grammar. What the job doesn't give you is enough. Not quite enough for rent without your husband's wages, Not quite enough to see a doctor when the thing in your chest starts doing that thing. A GP visit costs $3 to $5, which is most of a day's pay, and the condition usually has to get considerably more interesting before you make the appointment. The body gets used to being a low priority. It is, in its way, a very practical adaptation. You collect your pay envelope on Friday. You open it in the cloakroom, not the canteen. The number is correct. The number is always correct. That's the part that stays with you. Not that anyone made a mistake, but that no one did. You raise your hand at the bench when you need to use the bathroom, and you wait for the floor supervisor to see your hand, and the floor supervisor is a man in shirt sleeves with a clipboard who has opinions about how often a woman should need the bathroom. He nods, or he doesn't. If he doesn't, you put your hand down and wait 15 minutes and try again. The other women on the bench look at their work. Looking at your hand does not help your hand, and they know it. The clipboard isn't tracking production, it's tracking you. How many times you stood up, how long you were gone, whether you spoke to anyone on your way back. A supervisor named Gerald once told a woman on the second shift that she had a bladder problem and perhaps should see a doctor. She couldn't afford a doctor. Gerald had no follow-up suggestion. Gerald never does. The bathroom itself has 2 stalls for 43 women. The mirror is cracked along one corner in a way that makes your reflection look like it's thinking very hard about something. There's no soap on Thursdays, not because anyone takes it, but because Thursday is when the supply cabinet gets restocked and Wednesday is when it runs out. You've learned to keep a small bar in your apron pocket, which the supervisor has also noticed and has opinions about. The line moves in 8-second intervals. The machine doesn't wait for you to return. Your neighbor Dolores covers your station when you're gone, which means Dolores is doing 2 jobs simultaneously, while the man across the aisle is doing 0. Dolores has been doing this for 11 years and has the forearms to prove it. She hands you back your position without comment when you return, the way someone returns a borrowed pen, automatically, without expecting thanks. The math gets interesting here. 4 minutes round trip if Gerald nods quickly. 22 minutes if he doesn't see your hand, makes you wait, then watches the wall clock after he nods. The wall clock is a West clock the size of a side plate, and it has been on that wall since before Gerald was hired. The wall clock has seen things. 22 minutes is enough time to fall behind on a quota. Falling behind on a quota is a demerit. 3 demerits is a conversation with the floor manager, who is also a man, who also has a clipboard, and whose opinions about bathroom frequency are, if anything, more developed than Gerald's. Eunice on the 3rd bench has 2 demerits this month and is conducting her remaining shift on a strict water schedule. There's no written policy, nothing posted. The rule exists the way cold exists. You can't point to it, but it's very clearly doing something to you. The women on the floor have mapped Gerald's moods the way sailors map weather. His coffee arrives at 9:15, which is when he's most agreeable, after 2 p.m. He gets territorial about productivity numbers. Fridays before noon, he's distracted by paperwork and will nod at almost anything. The intelligence passes between shifts in whispers near the time clock, quiet, precise, and entirely off the record. It doesn't get written down. Writing it down would make it real in a way that invites consequences. Meanwhile, the women in the typing pools 2 miles away are managing a different species of the same problem. Marriage doesn't cost you your job by 1955 in most offices. The rules have loosened slightly on that point, but pregnancy does. Automatically. With 2 weeks' notice if you're lucky, and a handshake if you're not. You don't get to explain that you need the income more now than before. The form doesn't have a field for that. Back on the floor, your shift ends at 4:45. You collect your things from the locker with the broken latch that you've jammed shut, with a folded envelope for 3 months because the maintenance request went somewhere, and you walk out with Dolores and a woman named Frances who has 2 kids under 5 at home and a 40-minute bus ride ahead of her. Frances is already calculating dinner. She does this the way other people breathe, automatically, without effort, constantly. The 3 of you don't talk about the bathroom situation. You don't talk about the 63 cents. You talk about Frances's youngest, who said something funny last Tuesday, and about whether the butcher on Clement Street has anything decent left by the time the late shift gets there. The bus smells like damp wool and someone's lunch. You sit down. Your feet, briefly, stop hurting. Briefly. You eat at 12, and you have 30 minutes, and the 30 minutes are not paid, which is a phrase you have learned to say without thinking. You eat what you packed at 6 this morning, on the corner of the bench, with the iron unplugged but still warm. You don't go outside because it takes 7 minutes to reach the door and 7 to come back, and the women who go outside arrive back to a supervisor with a clipboard and a face. The sandwich is dripping on bread. You knew it would be. The bread is yesterday's. Not bad bread. Just bread that has made peace with its situation. You have dripping if it's Tuesday, which it is, because Tuesday is when the pan drippings from Sunday haven't gone off yet. There's a woman on the far end of the bench. Her name is Sylvia. She has a tin with a clasp lid, and she opens it every day with the expression of someone who has decided not to be disappointed. Inside the tin is a boiled egg, wrapped in a cloth, and 2 crackers. This is optimism. This is the 1952 version of a packed lunch that has genuine ambitions. Lunch in this room, in this building, isn't a break. It's a pause with paperwork. The clocking out is handled by a card that you slide through a machine, and the machine knows how long you were gone, and the machine does not have opinions about what you did while you were out, but Gerald's clipboard does. You are not required to eat in the building. You are not forbidden from leaving. The architecture, however, has its own position on the matter. The canteen is technically available. The canteen costs 11 cents for a bowl of soup that a 1952 Ohio Department of Labor inspector would generously describe as having opinions about being soup. You have 30 minutes, and the canteen has a queue of 26 women and 3 men. And the 3 men go first because the counter was designed that way, and the soup runs out at the 22nd woman with a regularity that suggests planning. So, you eat your dripping sandwich on the bench. The iron is warm next to you. It radiates judgment about your lunch, patient, unblinking, and reliably warm. A woman named Bertrice is eating a slice of white bread folded over itself, which doesn't have a formal name but has been a lunch in some variation since before either of you was born. She has a small waxed packet of salt. She applies the salt to the bread with the focus of someone seasoning a very important meal because she has decided that is what this is. The packet is the size of a sugar cube. She refolds it carefully when she's done. She will use the other half on Thursday. You're not really resting. You're doing arithmetic. You're calculating whether Friday's wages, which come to $22, $40 after the mandatory deductions you've stopped reading the breakdown for, cover the rent installment, the coal club payment, and 2 pairs of school shoes that cannot wait until next month because 1 pair has simply ceased to be shoes in any structural sense. The arithmetic doesn't pause for lunch. It runs continuously, like a machine you can't clock out of. There's no card slot for it. There's no supervisor with a clipboard watching it. It is entirely yours. The magazine on the break room wall, the one tacked up by someone in 1951 and not removed since, has suggestions. The magazine is Ladies' Home Journal. It is open to a spread about a woman in a white kitchen using a new automatic washing machine. She is wearing a blouse with a bow. The kitchen has 2 windows. You count the windows when you're in there, the way you count things that don't apply to you, clinically, from a distance, the way you'd read the menu at a restaurant you've never been in. The bow on her blouse is pressed. You can see that from across the room. You know what pressing takes. At 12:28 you fold the wax paper. You tuck it into your pocket because the bin is across the room, and 2 minutes is not nothing. Sylvia closes her tin with the clasp. A woman named Pat, who has been asleep with her eyes open in the way that only people who catch sleep in 12-minute segments can manage, opens them exactly on time. Nobody sets a watch. The bench knows. At 12:30, Gerald's clipboard reappears in the doorway, and the iron gets plugged back in, and the afternoon starts, and the 30 minutes are not paid. You receive the pay packet at the gate at 4:30 on Friday, in a small brown envelope with your initials on the front and your hours in pencil inside, and you put the envelope into your apron pocket without opening it, because opening it at the gate is not done. You open it at the kitchen table, with your husband, who opens his own at the same time. You count out the rent. You count out the coal. You count out what is left and what it must do, which is more than itself. The numbers are simple. Your envelope contains the product of 40 hours at 63 cents each. His contains the product of 40 hours at $1.34 each. You are standing at adjacent machines. The machines do not know this. The law, as of 1952, also does not know this, or knows, and has decided not to intervene, which is the more accurate version. You count out the coal. The rent goes first, always the rent, then the coal club payment, which is a weekly sum paid in advance toward a winter delivery that will arrive when you can least afford the drama of it. Then, the grocer, who carries you on standing credit and writes the balance in a small book he keeps behind the counter with your name on the spine. The book has your name on it. You do not get to see the book. This is the arrangement. The tallyman comes on Wednesday. He has already been this week, which means you've already negotiated that payment, which means it has already come off next Friday's envelope in your head, which means you are currently doing arithmetic across 2 weeks simultaneously while also peeling something. The debt doesn't sit still. It migrates forward. It sets up camp in next week's envelope and waits there, patient, comfortable, and entirely at home. Meredith Okafor lives 2 streets over and runs the Susu on your block, a rotating credit club where 12 women each put in £1 on Monday, and 1 woman takes the full £12 home that week, cycling through the year. You've been in Meredith's Susu for 4 years. When it was your turn in March, you got the washing mangle fixed. Meredith writes the schedule in a small notebook she keeps in her apron, and she taps the cover twice when she's done writing, like she's sealing something. The trust is in the tap. The consequence for missing your Monday pound is not a late fee. It is that Meredith stops tapping when she sees you, and everyone on your block notices the difference. Your husband's envelope is larger, not because he is more tired at the end of the day, though he is tired, not because his machine is harder to operate, because the line between his wage and yours was drawn before either of you showed up, and the factory prefers not to discuss it. The 1952 Ladies' Home Journal survey found that 60% of Americans believed a married woman working outside the home was damaging her family. The survey did not ask what the family would eat if she stopped. What's left after the fixed costs is called housekeeping money. You manage it in your head. The butcher on Tuesday, the milk on daily account, the children's shoes which cannot wait past this month, the aspirin you've been putting off because a GP visit is $3 and $3 is most of a day. The aspirin you will manage with, the shoes you will manage with, the GP you will defer until the thing requiring the GP becomes the kind of thing that cannot be deferred, which is the healthcare strategy of most of the street. You fold what remains into a small purse with a brass clasp that clicks. The click means the accounting is done. Your husband finishes his stack, slides his remainder across the table, and you add it to yours and begin again. 2 envelopes. 1 arithmetic. The brass clasp clicks a second time, which is not agreement, it's just the clasp. You go to work at the back door because the front door is not for you, and this is not written down anywhere but is known by everyone, including the children of the house, who learned it before they learned to read. You wear an apron over your dress, and you change into a fresh apron in a small room off the kitchen, where the previous apron is hung on a hook with your name on it in pencil. The pencil is faded. The hook is not. You tie the back. You step into the kitchen. In 1950, roughly 60% of employed black women in the United States are working in domestic service. Not by preference, by assignment. Factory work, clerical work, the typing pool on the 3rd floor of the insurance building, those doors have a different kind of closed. The National Labor Relations Act of 1935, which gave most American workers the right to organize, the right to bargain, the right to file a complaint if someone treats you like furniture, that act specifically excluded domestic workers. Someone wrote that exclusion in on purpose. The exclusion did not happen by accident. Your wages, if you are live-in, run $8 to $15 a week in Atlanta or Houston in 1952, room and board included, 6 days a week. The math on this is not complicated, which is perhaps why nobody does it out loud in front of you. $15 a week is less than the men at the plant earn in a single shift. The room you sleep in is off the kitchen, smaller than the room where the dog sleeps, and the dog sleeps well. The house itself, you know it better than the people who own it. You know which drawer sticks in the dining room sideboard, which floorboard on the second landing announces visitors before they've rounded the corner, which child will wake up crying at 2 Amima, and which one won't. Mrs. Calloway, she moves through the front rooms like they're a stage set, adjusting things that don't need adjusting. A figurine, a lampshade. She tilts a picture frame a half-inch to the left and steps back to admire it, and you note that it was already straight. You say nothing. You have said nothing about this for 11 months. The children know your name. The youngest one, a 4-year-old called Dougie, follows you through the kitchen asking questions at a rate that would impress a courtroom. He is small, curious, and reliably underfoot. You answer most of them. He has given you a drawing of a horse that looks more like a cloud with legs, which you keep folded in your apron pocket because there is nowhere else to keep it. Dougie doesn't understand the back door yet. He will. The question of what you eat. You eat after the family does, at the kitchen table, from what's left, which is occasionally generous and occasionally a demonstration of what generosity is not. If the roast stretched well, there's a plate for you. If it didn't, there's bread and the suggestion of a plate. You do not comment on this. Commenting is not in the $11 column and certainly not in the 15. You are not covered by minimum wage protections. You are not covered by unemployment insurance. If Mrs. Calloway decides in February that she no longer requires your services, there's no form to file, no notice required, no severance owed. The arrangement ends because she says so, and you carry your apron home in a paper bag. The pencil name stays on the hook. The hook doesn't remember you. Some mornings a woman named Josephine arrives at the house 3 blocks over, same hour, same back door, same apron ritual. She and you have never been formally introduced because there's been no occasion that required it. You see each other at the bus stop at 6:15 and you nod, and she nods, and the nod contains a full paragraph of information that neither of you needs to say out loud. The bus takes you both to different back doors. It picks you both up again at 8 in the evening, when the dishes are done and the children are down, and the front rooms have been straightened for no one in particular. The bus smells like the end of the day. It always does. You address the woman of the house as Mrs. Whitfield, and she addresses you as Lillian, which is your first name, and this is the arrangement. And the arrangement has been the arrangement for as long as there has been a house on Peachtree. Mrs. Whitfield's children, who are 9 and 7, also address you as Lillian. Mrs. Whitfield's husband, when he is home, does too. You serve lunch. You take the plates away. You return to the kitchen, where the door is closed when the family is eating. The kitchen is yours, in the way that a room can belong to someone without belonging to them. You know where the good knife is kept. You know which burner runs hot. You know that the youngest child, Emmett, will not eat anything orange, and that Mrs. Whitfield knows this too, but still requests the carrots because the paediatrician said so. You make the carrots. Emmett does not eat them. The paediatrician remains confident in his position. Your wages. It is 1952, and your pay for 6 days is somewhere between $8 and $15, depending on how the week went and whether Mrs. Whitfield considers this week a full week. Room and board are included, which sounds like a benefit until you consider that your room is off the kitchen, that the board is whatever is left after the family has eaten, and that being included in the house means you are also never not in the house. There is no unemployment insurance attached to this job. There is no minimum wage attached to this job. The National Labor Relations Act of 1935 made a specific decision about domestic workers, and that decision was not these ones. You have a half-day Thursday and all of Sunday, except when Mrs. Whitfield has guests on Sunday, which is most Sundays between April and October. You don't say anything about this. The math of what you don't say would fill a ledger. Mrs. Whitfield is not a cruel woman, in the way that she would describe herself if asked, which she has not been. She is efficient, organised, and quietly thorough. She keeps the household account in a small green book and updates it every Friday with a mechanical pencil she bought at a stationery shop on Peachtree, which is the same street where the house is, which is the same street where you have lived for 4 years without being from. She does not use your last name because she does not know it. Not a secret. Just not a question she's asked. Your last name is Pierce. You were born in Savannah. You are 31 years old. Della Pierce, who is your cousin, works 3 blocks over and makes $11 a week and has Fridays off, which is better than your Thursdays by most measures. You and Della communicate through a network that is faster than the postal service and costs nothing. A neighbour's porch, a church vestibule, the bus stop on Auburn Avenue. The information that moves through this network includes job openings, which employers pay late, which employers count the silverware after you leave, and which doctors on the south side will see you on a sliding scale. It runs on no budget. It has no office. It operates entirely around the schedules of women who work 6 days a week for other people's families. A woman named Cora, who you know from the Auburn Avenue stop, carries a small notebook where she records the names of every employer who has shorted a wage in the last 3 years. The notebook is not a threat. It's just a notebook. But Cora has very good handwriting and she lets people read it. Mrs. Whitfield would not know about Cora's notebook. The kitchen door is closed at lunch. You will take the plates back out now. You will smile, because Emmett is looking at you the way a 7-year-old looks when he wants something and hasn't decided if he's going to ask. You will refill the water glasses. You will return to the kitchen, and the carrots will still be on Emmett's plate, and the burner on the left will still run hot, and the good knife will be exactly where you left it, because you are the one who leaves it there. You give your eldest the house key on a length of string before you leave for the shift, and she wears it around her neck under her collar, and at 3:30 she lets herself in and lets her younger brother in behind her, and fixes them both bread and butter and a glass of milk. She is 9. The neighbours know. The neighbours have a key for emergencies, and there have been no emergencies, which is what the word emergencies means in this arrangement, until the day it doesn't. A 1956 Detroit study put numbers to what the block already knows. Roughly 40% of working mothers with children under 6 are relying on relatives for childcare, and about 15% are relying on a sibling under 14. That second number is your daughter. She doesn't call herself anything in particular. The study will eventually produce the phrase latchkey child, which sounds clinical and tidy and does not account for the fact that she's also making sure the younger one doesn't touch the stove. The arrangement has more moving parts than it looks like from the outside. Your mother comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays when her hip allows, which means her hip is part of the childcare structure whether it knows it or not. Mrs. Gradwell from the flat above collects the younger one from school on Mondays because you collect her Gloria on Fridays, and this deal has been running for 2 years entirely on verbal handshake and the mutual understanding that neither of you can afford to be the one who breaks it. There is no contract. There is no backup plan that isn't another neighbour. The cost of actual paid childcare in 1952 runs somewhere between $4 and $8 a week, which is between a quarter and half your take-home from the line. The arithmetic doesn't close. It has never closed. You've stopped checking. Your daughter, whose name is Patricia but who everyone calls Pat, has developed a system. She does her homework at the kitchen table while her brother Raymond plays on the floor, and she can tell by the sound of the front gate whether it's you coming home or the coal man or someone who has the wrong address. She has identified 3 different wrong address people by their footstep pattern. She is, in the language of a skill no one will ever put on a school report, very good at this. Pat knows not to open the door after dark without calling through first. She knows the gas meter takes a shilling and where the spare shillings are kept, behind the tea caddy, not in it. She knows Raymond gets half a biscuit before dinner and not a whole one because the whole one ruins his appetite and you need him to eat the dinner. She has absorbed the operating manual for the household and is running it at 9 years old, quiet, capable, and reliably composed. With the competence of someone considerably older and the authority of someone who has no authority at all, a woman named Dottie Okafor 2 streets over has a different version of this. Her eldest is a boy, 13, and he reheats whatever she leaves in the pot and makes sure his 3 younger siblings are inside before dark. And on the days the pot is empty, he takes everyone to his aunt's without being asked, because he has learned that asking takes time the situation doesn't have. The aunt lives 6 blocks away. He has walked it so many times he could do it in the dark. He has done it in the dark. The school knows none of this. The school sees Pat as a quiet child who finishes her work and doesn't cause trouble, and is probably not being stretched sufficiently, which is the school's way of saying she seems capable of more, offered as an observation rather than a plan. The guidance track for a quiet, capable girl whose mother works a factory line in 1954 runs straight to a typing certificate. It doesn't pause to ask what she can already do. You drop the baby at your mother's on the way to the bus stop because your mother lives 2 streets over and has had 6 children of her own and considers a 7th briefly on the days the baby is good. Your mother does not charge. You bring a tin of milk and a packet of biscuits and a pair of your father's socks that you have darned, and these are not payment, exactly, but are also not nothing. The baby is asleep when you arrive. Your mother takes him without waking him. The handoff happens in the doorway, not inside, because stepping inside means sitting down, and sitting down means tea, and tea means you miss the 7:14. Your mother stands in her housecoat and her good slippers, the ones she changes into at 6 every morning because the backs of her heels have been bad since 1947, and she holds the baby in the crook of her arm, with the practiced calm of someone who has long since stopped being impressed by babies. She says nothing. You say nothing. The bus does not care about either of you. The arrangement costs nothing in money. which is precisely why it works. What it costs is the standing obligation that accumulates quietly on a shelf somewhere in the back of your relationship with your mother, next to the favour she did in March, and the favour you did before Christmas, and the ongoing diplomatic situation with your sister-in-law that your mother is carefully not commenting on. The shelf is full. The shelf has always been full. The shelf is the relationship. Your mother's name is Vera. Vera Hendricks, née Oates, who had her first child at 22 and her last at 38, who has 3 grandchildren now across 2 addresses, and who moves through the morning with the unhurried efficiency of someone who stopped being surprised by mornings approximately 40 years ago. She holds the baby in the kitchen, which is the warm room, near the fire she's had going since 6. The fire has opinions about coal. Vera does not. She puts on more, and the room adjusts. The kitchen is small. There is a table, 2 chairs that match and 1 that doesn't, a small wooden dresser with cups hung by their handles, and a tin of shortbread that has not contained shortbread in 3 years but works admirably as a place to keep rubber bands, a spare button, and 14 pence in mixed coins. The baby wakes up at some point and becomes Vera's project for the next 9 hours, which involves a routine she has not described to anyone because describing it would imply it could be done differently, and it cannot. Vera is one of roughly 40% of working mothers' relatives doing this on a Tuesday in 1956, by the Detroit Study's count, though Vera has never heard of the Detroit Study and would not be interested in its findings. She rocks the baby on her good hip, watchful, patient, and reliably awake, because the alternative is her grandchild going somewhere else or going nowhere, which is worse. The study called it informal. Vera would not call it anything. It is Tuesday. The biscuits you brought are the nice ones which your mother prefers because they have coconut on top and because your father used to buy them on Fridays when he was still working. This is a fact you both know and neither of you mentions. You've been bringing the nice ones for 8 months. You will bring them next week. The gesture has acquired the gravity of a small ritual, which it is. By 7:30, you're at the bus stop in your good coat. Not your good coat, your only coat, your everyday coat, which is also your coat for the interview you didn't get, and the coat for the funeral in November, and the coat for Sundays. A woman named Carol from your floor at the factory is already at the stop. She nods. You nod. The bus is late in the way the bus is always late, which is not randomly but according to a pattern you have memorized so completely that you leave the house 3 minutes earlier than the schedule suggests and still feel behind. The bus arrives. Both of you get on. You watch the cough for 3 days before you do anything, because a visit to the doctor costs $3, which is half a day's wage, and so the cough has been going for 3 days. You boil a kettle. You spread mustard on a square of flannel. You lay the flannel on the child's chest and a clean towel over it, and you sit by the bed and watch, because the plaster will sting after 7 minutes and you don't want her surprised. She watches the ceiling. The kettle ticks on the stove. $3 is not a small thing. A GP visit in the early 1950s runs $3 to $5, which is a quarter to half a day's wages, depending on what the factory paid you this week, which is itself variable in ways that your supervisor explains in a tone suggesting you should be grateful for the variability. So you wait, you apply heat, you apply mustard, you apply the turpentine liniment that your mother used and her mother before her, which smells like the inside of a hardware store and works, as far as anyone can tell, about as well as waiting would have worked anyway. The home remedy cabinet is not really a cabinet. It's a shelf. On it, the Vaseline, which handles chapped lips, diaper rash, the baby's hair, and at least 3 situations that don't have names. A bottle of camphorated oil, a tin of zinc ointment, aspirin, rationed because aspirin costs money too, the mustard powder, bought in bulk, because bulk is cheaper, and because this is not the first cough, and will not be the last. Your mother had this shelf. You have this shelf. The shelf is patient, undecorated, and reliably stocked, a complete medical system, as long as you have already diagnosed the problem correctly. When the cough doesn't clear, you wait another 2 days. Then you go. The doctor's office smells like floor wax and someone else's anxiety. The doctor, almost certainly a man, almost certainly rushed, writes something on a pad and says to keep her warm and give her fluids. This is, more or less, what the mustard plaster was doing. You pay the $3. The receipt is small. The walk home is longer than the walk there. Dentistry is its own calculation. A filling in 1952 costs roughly the same as the doctor visit, plus the afternoon off work, which you don't get paid for. So you manage toothache the same way you manage the cough. Oil of cloves on a cotton ball, pressure from the thumb, aspirin dissolved and held against the gum, which does not fix the tooth but does something to the nerve for approximately 40 minutes, which is long enough to get through the shift. Margaret Oates, that's your neighbour on the left, the one with the good coat and the husband who works nights, went 2 years on a back molar before she went in. She said the dentist looked at her like she'd done it on purpose. US. Maternal mortality in 1950 stands at 83.3 deaths per 100,000 live births. You don't know that number. You know that your sister-in-law had a bad time with her third, that Mrs. Paulie down the road didn't come home from the hospital after her second, that these things happen and are not spoken about at length, because speaking about them at length does not help anyone get the wash done. Black women in 1950 die in childbirth at roughly 3 times the rate of white women. Mrs. Paulie was white. Mrs. Hadley, 2 streets behind her, who didn't come home from her first, was not. 2 empty houses, 4 blocks apart. The street notices both. It notices them differently. The midwife costs less than the hospital. The hospital costs less than you can afford if anything goes wrong. So you calculate. Most working-class women in Britain and America deliver in hospital by the mid-1950s, but the ward is not the private room. The ward has 6 beds. The ward has curtains that don't fully close. Twilight sleep, a standard cocktail of morphine and scopolamine, is routine. It leaves you with no memory of having given birth. One day, you are in labour. The next, you are in a bed with a child beside you that is yours, apparently, which you are asked to confirm, which you do, while your body reconstructs what happened without your participation. It's efficient. Nobody asks if you minded. You mind. But the word for minding doesn't quite exist yet, and you have a mustard plaster to check on, and 7 minutes is almost up. You take the bus across town on a Wednesday morning because the clinic is open on Wednesdays, and the clinic does not require a husband's signature in this state, which not every state can say. The waiting room has 6 chairs and 3 women in them, and none of you look at each other, because looking at each other is not what this room is for. The receptionist calls you Mrs., even though she does not know your name yet, because the form will require a Mrs., and the form is the room's true authority. The form has 8 questions. 3 of them are about your husband. 1 is about your husband's employer. The clinic runs on a sliding fee scale, which means you pay what you can, which means you pay $2 and feel, briefly, like you have gotten away with something. You haven't. The $2 come out of the Coal Club envelope, and the Coal Club envelope was already short. The real reason you're here is not the official reason, not the reason on the form, not the reason the receptionist writes in her careful print. The real reason is that you have 3 children already, the youngest not yet walking, and the rent went up in March, and you did the arithmetic in the kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night with a pencil stub and a piece of paper from your daughter's school notebook, and the arithmetic was very clear about what it thought of a 4th child. The arithmetic had opinions, flat, hard, and unenthusiastic. A nurse named Vera hands you a pamphlet. Vera has the posture of someone who has handed out this exact pamphlet 400 times and intends to hand it out 400 more without comment. The pamphlet explains the diaphragm. The pamphlet uses diagrams. The diagrams are clinical and optimistic in equal measure, like an instruction manual for something that should be obvious but apparently isn't. The diaphragm requires a fitting. The fitting requires a follow-up. The follow-up costs another $1.50. The diaphragm itself costs $3, which is just under 5 hours of work at the factory rate, which you have already calculated on the bus. You know your hourly wage the way a pilot knows altitude, constantly, without being asked. The other option is what the women on your street call not discussing it, which covers a range of approaches from the rhythm method, which requires a regularity your body has never once demonstrated, to arrangements that cost $50 minimum and take place in addresses you get from someone who gets them from someone else, passed through 3 conversations that never happened. Historians will later estimate somewhere between 200,000 and 1.2 million of these arrangements per year in the 1950s United States. The number has a very wide range because nobody was keeping official records. Nobody was keeping official records because nobody officially knew. Vera comes back and takes the pamphlet and leads you to a small room with a paper-covered table. A doctor named Dr. Halvorsen comes in, shakes your hand once with the brisk efficiency of a man with 9 more appointments, and does not ask you a single question about your life. This is fine. This is, in fact, preferable. The less he knows about the arithmetic, the better. The fitting takes 7 minutes. You are back on the bus by 11:40. The woman who sat next to you in the waiting room, blue headscarf, work shoes, a paper bag on her lap she holds like it contains something fragile, is already gone. You don't know her name. You never will. But you recognize the specific tiredness around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders slightly forward, the arithmetic written in her posture the same way it's written in yours. You get off 2 stops early to pick up bread before the shop sells out of the good loaves. The clinic visit goes in your head under the category of handled, not solved, not fixed. Handled, for now, until the next Wednesday, the next envelope, the next pencil stub at 11 o'clock. You ask the woman who runs the corner shop, because you have nowhere else to ask, and she does not answer at once. She finishes weighing the potatoes. She closes the brown paper bag. She writes a name on a slip of paper and a telephone number underneath, and she folds the slip in half, and she puts it into your hand with the change. She does not say the name aloud. She does not need to. You put the slip in your pocket. You take the potatoes. You walk home. The slip of paper is not a referral. There's no form attached to it. No office hours printed at the bottom. No waiting room with magazines from 3 months ago. It's a name a friend gives you, folded once, sitting in your coat pocket with the change. The number is $50. That's the floor. The floor in 1952. $50 when your husband earns $63 in a week that goes well, and the week does not always go well. $50 before rent, before coal, before the tallyman on Wednesday, before the grocer's standing credit you haven't cleared since March. The arithmetic does not resolve. You do it anyway, on the walk home carrying the potatoes. Missus Delaney on your street went last year. You know this the way you know everything on your street, not because anyone said it plainly, but because she was sick for a week, and then she wasn't, and her sister came and stayed, and nobody discussed it. The same way you know whose husband lost his Friday shift. The same way you know who is short again. The information arrives without being sent. The woman you call answers on the 3rd ring. Her voice is flat, businesslike, and faintly bored, like someone confirming a dentist appointment. She gives you a time. She gives you an address. She says bring cash, and bring someone you trust. She does not say bring your husband. The omission is the instruction. The person you bring is not your husband. It's your neighbour Glenys, who has done this before for 2 other women and said nothing to anyone after either time, which is why she's the person you call. Glenys puts on her good coat. You put on yours. You take a bus you don't usually take, to a part of the neighbourhood you don't usually go, and you sit in the back, not talking. The bus costs 11 cents. You have counted the 11 cents. The address is in a part of the city you have never had reason to go to. The woman whose hands you will shake first is wearing a wedding ring she did not buy, an apron she did, and a wristwatch that has been 10 minutes fast for as long as she has owned it. She is not going to introduce herself. The wristwatch will keep its own time. Afterward, Glenys walks you to the bus stop and stands with you until the bus comes. She doesn't ask how you feel. She already knows how you feel. She asks if you want her to come back to the flat and sit for a while, and you say yes, and she does, and she makes tea without asking where anything is because she's been in your kitchen 100 times. She pours the tea, she puts 4 sugars in hers, she doesn't make it mean anything. The kettle clicks off, the biscuit tin stays closed, nobody knocks. The $50 takes 6 weeks to pay back. You pull it from the grocery money, a little each week, and you tell your husband the prices have gone up, which is also true, so it isn't entirely a lie, which is a distinction that matters to you and to no one else. The debt doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, patient as furniture, until it's gone. You arrive at the public ward at 3 a.m, and a nurse you have not met before puts a needle into the back of your hand, and the room becomes pleasant in the way that rooms become pleasant when you have stopped being entirely in them, and the next thing you remember is morning. A nurse, with a slight impatience, explains that the small wrapped bundle on the cot next to yours is yours. You do not remember the birth. You do not remember the night. You remember the needle, and then the morning. The needle is twilight sleep. Morphine and scopolamine mixed by a sister at the trolley with the unhurried, watchful and quietly thorough motions of someone who has done it 500 times. The 1950 ward uses the ratio because the 1949 ward used the ratio. You are not unconscious. You are absent. The chart will note that everything proceeded normally, and the chart will be correct in the only sense the chart understands. The scopolamine has a side effect they don't mention beforehand. It makes you agitated in the gap you won't remember, thrashing sometimes, or crying, or gripping the rail of the bed very hard. Sister Pierce keeps a pair of padded cuffs in the drawer beneath the kidney bowl for this purpose. The cuffs are not in the chart either. The drawer doesn't squeak. The ward holds 8 beds. The women on the other 7 have also had the needle, which means the conversation, when it does come, arrives in fragments and non sequiturs, like a cocktail party where everyone arrived at different times and the cocktail was the same. Sister Pierce moves between beds with a clipboard, making notations in a handwriting that suggests she has made these same notations a great many times and is no longer surprised by any of it. The clipboard never leaves her hand. The hand never hurries. The private room, 2 corridors away, costs more than you earn in a week. In the private room, a woman whose husband is a solicitor is also having a baby, but she was told what would happen to her beforehand, and there is one nurse assigned only to her, and afterward someone brings flowers. Your flowers, if any come, are handed through a gap in a schedule by a husband who is not allowed on the ward before 2 in the afternoon, and who holds his hat like the hat might float away if he lets go. The ward has no intake paperwork to speak of. There is a wooden tray by the door with a stack of admission cards, a pencil tied to a string, and a small handwritten sign that says fill in name, age, parity. Parity means how many. The card has a single line for it. Nothing on the card asks how you are. The pencil is sharpened to the nub. A midwife named Mrs. Dobbins, broad, unhurried, with the air of someone who has seen every possible human situation and declined to be rattled by any of them, handles deliveries at home for women who can't get to the ward in time or who simply don't. She charges a flat fee and takes installments. She brings her own bag, which is worn at the clasp and smells faintly of carbolic. She sits with you. This is not a small thing. She sits with you. The episiotomy is performed without discussion, because discussion in 1950 public obstetrics is not the model. The model is that the doctor decides, and the chart records, and you recover. Recovery is 3 days on the ward if there are no complications and the bed is needed, which the bed usually is. On day 3, a woman in the next bed is helped upright by her own considerable determination and the grip of a nurse who says, briskly, "Time to get moving, love," in a tone that is not unkind but is also not asking. You go home with a bundle and a printed sheet of instructions for feeding times. The sheet does not mention that you haven't slept in 2 days, or that the stairs in your building have 43 steps, which you know because you have just counted them. The bundle is quiet at the bottom, loud at the top. The night the memory should have been is just a blank place on the shelf. Your body, however, has kept a meticulous receipt and intends to present it to you, line by line, over the next 6 weeks. You go to the doctor about the headaches and the sleeplessness and the feeling that you described with some difficulty as a kind of low buzzing in the chest, and the doctor listens for 4 minutes and writes you a prescription for Milltown, which is a small white pill from a small white bottle, and which 36 million Americans were prescribed last year, including, you will later learn, the woman next door and the woman across the road. You take one with breakfast. You don't notice the headaches go. You notice that you don't notice them. Milltown is meprobamat, launched in 1955, and it is the first pharmaceutical blockbuster in the modern sense, meaning a drug prescribed so widely and so fast that the supply chain can barely keep up with the demand. Pharmacies in New York and Chicago run out in the first months. There are waiting lists. A waiting list. For a tranquilizer. The bottle is small, white, and quietly insistent, and sits in the back of your kitchen cupboard behind the bicarbonate of soda, which is where you put things you use but don't want talked about. The diagnosis is nerves. It's always nerves. The doctor doesn't use the word nervously or apologetically. He uses it the way he uses the word elbow, as a neutral anatomical fact requiring management. You have nerves. He has a pad. The transaction is 4 minutes and $3, which is most of half a day's wages, so you don't go until the buzzing has been present for several weeks, and you've already tried aspirin and a hot compress, and telling yourself to stop being dramatic. The aspirin has an opinion about your stomach. The hot compress is fine but doesn't do much. The stop being dramatic phase lasts the longest. By 1957, Milltown is everywhere a woman could be. It's in the handbags of secretaries at the typing pools and in the medicine cabinets of women who've never worked a day outside the house. A man with 4 minutes to spare and the same chest buzzing gets a different word and a different piece of paper. You get the little white bottle. The little white bottle does not stop the coal from needing to be laid at 5:30 in the morning. It does not renegotiate the 43 cents you're short on Friday. It doesn't make the supervisor let you use the bathroom before your scheduled break. And it doesn't retroactively add any fixed baths to the 37% of English homes that don't have them. What it does is make the distance between you and all of those things feel slightly larger. Not gone, larger. The low buzzing in the chest retreats to something more like a low buzzing in the next room. A woman named Dorothea, who works the Tuesday through Saturday shift at an electronics assembly plant outside Cincinnati, keeps hers in a compact alongside a pressed powder cake and a stub of a lipstick she's had since Easter. She takes one at lunch, sitting on the steps at the side of the building because the break room has a smell she finds difficult. She doesn't tell her husband. He would have an opinion about the pill the same way he has an opinion about the doctor's bill, and neither opinion would be useful. A cigarette, by 1956, does about the same work for about 21 cents a pack and requires no prescription. 28% of American women smoke. The cigarette can be held in your hand while you stand at the kitchen window at 6 in the morning before anyone else wakes up. It's not medicine. It's a pause. The pause has a shape. Dorothea has both. Pill at lunch, cigarette at the kitchen window, and would not say one is doing anything different from the other. The bottle empties. You go back. The doctor refills it in about 2 minutes this time, which is an improvement. Neither of you mentions what it's for. The buzzing is there or it isn't. The bottle is in the cupboard or it's running low. You smoke on the back step after the dishes because the kitchen smells of cabbage and the back step does not, and because the back step is the one place in the house where nobody asks you anything. A pack of Chesterfields costs 21 cents. You keep them in the drawer with the matches and the string, and you take one out, and you light it from the gas ring on your way out the door, because matches are for company. You sit on the step. You exhale. The yard is quiet. By 1955, roughly 28% of American women smoke. The number is higher in cities, higher still in neighborhoods where the work is physical and the hours are long, and the back step is the only room that belongs to you. The cigarette is not a vice, exactly. It's a timer, a personal appointment. The length of one cigarette is the length of time that is yours, and you know it down to the last quarter inch. It's also an appetite suppressant, which the ads don't say directly but do strongly imply with photographs of very thin women standing near very thin cigarettes. Your grocery budget doesn't accommodate this fact consciously. Your body accommodates it practically. You eat less. The cigarette fills something. Not much. Enough. But. The cigarette is also what you're not doing during the cigarette. You're not thinking about the tallyman coming Wednesday. You're not calculating whether the Coal Club contribution can wait until Thursday without Vera finding out. You're not counting backward from payday in units of bread and dripping. The cigarette doesn't solve any of this. It just makes the arithmetic pause for 3 minutes, which is the cigarette's entire value proposition and which is honestly competitive with the Milltown in Dorothea's compact 2 streets over. A woman named Shirley, who works a Wednesday to Saturday shift at the laundry on Perkins and has the forearms to prove it, comes out her own back gate around this same hour most nights. She doesn't say anything. You don't say anything. She lights hers off the end of yours, which is the working class equivalent of a firm handshake, and you both look at the yard, which contains a dustbin, 2 bricks holding up nothing, and a privet hedge with strong opinions about its own borders. The hedge is thriving, smug, and faintly territorial. You find this slightly annoying. The back step isn't technically outside. It's the hinge between inside and out, close enough to hear the wireless through the window, far enough that the children don't bother. The precision has been calibrated over years. 6 inches further and you're in the yard, which is cold and smells of the drain. 6 inches back and you're in the kitchen, which is warm and smells of obligation. The step is the exact distance from both. The step is also where the neighbourhood actually runs. Not the pub, not the church hall, though those matter, but here and at Shirley's gate, and on Agnes Pete's front doorstep where she takes her constitutional cigarette at 8:30 with the posture of someone receiving an official briefing. Agnes knows which GP gives sick notes without the usual performance, which butcher puts aside the better mince for regulars on Thursdays, and whether the family at number 11 are 1 week behind on rent or two. She communicates this in the time it takes to smoke a cigarette. The cigarette is the format. The information is the content. Agnes is, functionally, the neighborhood's entire infrastructure department. You finish yours. The ember goes orange once, twice, and then you press it against the brick and put the stub back in the pack. Because 21 cents doesn't mean you throw away a quarter of it. You stand up. Your back makes a small observation about the step. You go inside. The kitchen still smells of cabbage. The dishes are done. The yard is quiet. The hedge continues not to care. You hear the tallyman at 3 on Wednesday because 3 on Wednesday is when the tallyman knocks, and the front room is tidied by 10 to 3 because the tallyman, who sells you blouses and tea towels on weekly installment at an interest rate that effectively doubles the price, has opinions about which homes are kept and which are not. You have the shillings ready in a small tin on the mantel. You answer the door. You count them out into his palm. He marks the book. He says good afternoon. He moves on. The book is important. Not yours, his. He carries it in a breast pocket that has gone shiny from the breast pocket carrying things. Your name is in it, and next to your name is a running total that never quite reaches zero because the moment it threatens to, you've needed a new set of curtains or a winter coat for the youngest, and the tallyman, who is not unkind but is also absolutely not running a charity, has both in his bag. The interest isn't called interest, it's just the price. The price of the blouse in the shop window is 7 and 6. The price of the same blouse on instalment, carried to your door and marked in a book with your name in it, is 14 shillings and change. This is basically Klarna, except Klarna doesn't knock, and your neighbours don't get to watch you count. Missus. Downing across the road has her net curtain at a precise angle that allows her to observe the door without technically observing the door. She isn't cruel, she's watchful, patient, and reliably gathering. The tallyman's visit is data. Who's buying, who's behind, who answered in a housecoat, who looks cheerful. A woman named Dot, 3 doors down, once answered the door with flour on her hands, and became Flower Hands Dot for the next 2 years. Not unkindly, just permanently. The neighbourhood has a long memory, a perfect index, and no filing system. You're not just one payment behind or one ahead. You're running 4 or 5 overlapping obligations in your head simultaneously. The tallyman on Wednesday, the coal club on Saturday, rent on Friday, the grocer on standing credit that resets Monday. None of this is written down anywhere you own. It's all in your head, organised by day of the week and the particular quality of dread each one produces. The rent produces a low, steady dread. The tallyman produces a sharper, more social dread. Missing the coal club means a cold house, which is its own category of problem entirely. The whole system is basically a spreadsheet, except the spreadsheet is a person, and shame is the late fee. Vera does this for her household without anyone calling it work. She can tell you, without pausing to think, what she owes, to whom, in what order of urgency, and which of those creditors will speak to her husband about it and which will simply not. On Wednesday at 3, she sits at her kitchen table with 3 small tins lined up, tallyman, coal club, doctor, and moves shillings between them with the unhurried attention of someone laying out cards. The tea cools while she does this. She doesn't notice the tea. Her husband thinks the household runs itself. The household runs on Vera. The tallyman moves on to the next door. You close yours. The tin on the mantel is lighter. The curtain across the road resettles. You go back to the kitchen, where the kettle has been waiting with the patience of something that has done this before. You host the penny club at your kitchen table on Friday evenings, and 5 of you sit down, and each of you puts a shilling into a tin, and the tin holds 5 shillings, and the 5 shillings go to whichever of you the week belongs to, and the rotation has been fixed for 14 weeks running. You are week 8. Week 8 is a winter coat for the boy, who has outgrown the last one and refuses, gently, to admit it. The teapot is on the table, the biscuits are not. The bank hasn't said no. The bank hasn't said anything at all, because you don't have an account, and the branch on Fernley Road has a particular glass door that communicates its own feelings on the matter very clearly. The penny club doesn't require a glass door. It requires 5 women who show up every Friday in a tin that holds the running total without complaint. The tin is an old tobacco tin. It has a dent in the left side from a disagreement nobody discusses anymore. Phyllis works the early shift at the biscuit factory and arrives with a faint powdered sugar haze she doesn't acknowledge, sits at the end. Joan, who is week 3 and has already spent week 3 in her head 17 times since Sunday, sits across from you with her coat still on because she ran from the bus. Norma is week 12 and radiates the patient confidence of someone who can wait. Ethel is week 1. Ethel has already been paid out and is here out of loyalty and a preference for your kitchen over her own, which is cold. 5 women, 1 tin. The arrangement is basically a bank, except the interest rate is 0, the loan officer is also the client, and the collateral is that everyone on this street knows your name. 2 streets over, Mrs. Estrada runs a tanda for 6 of her cousins out of a front room that smells of coffee and cilantro. The shillings are pesos, the tin is a cigar box, the dent is on the lid. Otherwise the arithmetic, 5 hands, 1 box, a rotation written nowhere but agreed on completely, is identical. The Susu Missus. Charles runs in her sister's parlour 4 blocks east, takes pound notes from women who clean offices on Lexington, and never miss a Sunday. Missing a payment doesn't cost you a late fee. It costs you Norma's expression. Norma's expression is brief, quiet, and slightly disappointed, and contains more information than a formal letter. You have never missed a payment. You won't. The amount in the tin doesn't scale to anything the bank would consider significant, but the bank also can't tell you which week is a winter coat and which week is a dentist appointment that can't wait anymore. The tin can. You've built the rotation around it. Friday evening is when the information moves too. Phyllis heard the mill on Cartwright Street is taking on 2 days a week, no references required. Joan's sister-in-law knows a GP on Doncaster Road who charges 2 shillings instead of 4 and doesn't ask follow-up questions. The beauty parlour does it better, but Friday is free. The teapot handles the rest. By the time the evening is over, you've covered 5 households worth of logistical intelligence without anyone writing anything down. Writing things down is for institutions. The tin is for the rest of it. The boy's coat will come from the market on Saturday morning, 3rd stall from the left, the man who doesn't haggle before 10. You know this because Norma bought her daughter's school shoes there in October, and the leather has held. You file that. Week 8 is in 2 Fridays. The tin goes home with Joan tonight. Joan holds it in her lap on the bus like it contains something fragile, which it does. You go to Marie's beauty parlour on Wednesday for a shampoo and set, which costs $1.50 and which takes 90 minutes, and which is the closest thing you have to a meeting. Marie knows who is hiring at the laundry and who is hiring at the dime store and which doctor will see you without payment if your husband is laid off and which landlord on the avenue is selling. The dryer hums. The conversation does not stop for the dryer. You sit. You listen. You add what you know. Marie's is not on any directory. It's a front room with 3 dryer chairs, a sink that leans slightly to the left, and a mirror that makes everyone look approximately 17% more tired than they actually are. Marie herself sets your hair with the focused authority of a field surgeon, pin, roller, pin, while conducting 3 separate conversations simultaneously and never losing the thread of any of them. She doesn't forget names. She doesn't forget debts. She doesn't forget which woman's husband came home at what hour last Thursday, and she's not going to forget yours. By the time you're under the dryer, you've learned that the dress factory on Clement is taking applications on Fridays only, that the foreman at the cannery has been replaced, and the new one is considerably less terrible about bathroom breaks, and that Dr. Okafor 2 blocks over will let you pay in installments if you come in before 10 and bring a referral from someone he knows. This is information you could not have gotten from a newspaper, a phone directory, or anyone with an office. It lives here, in the dryer heat, distributed in real time. It's basically LinkedIn, except everyone has wet hair, and the algorithm is Marie. Dorothy, who comes in at 2:30 every Wednesday and always takes the middle chair, slides you a folded piece of paper with an address on it while Marie's back is turned. The address is for a seamstress who does alterations cheaply and doesn't ask where the dress came from. Dorothy does this with the smooth, practiced gesture of someone who has been passing notes since the 3rd grade. She smooths her smock. She says nothing. The paper disappears into your coat pocket. Mrs. Hannigan, 2 chairs down, mentions her sister-in-law in the way you mention the weather. The sister-in-law is 2 months gone and the husband doesn't know yet. Marie doesn't look up from the roller. She says she's heard the bus from the depot on 50-second runs late on a Tuesday, conversational and bright, and Mrs. Hannigan nods. The address 2 blocks past the depot is not said aloud. It doesn't need to be. The conversation has the calm, layered, and faintly choreographed quality of a thing rehearsed without ever being rehearsed. The other thing Marie's carries is the kind of quiet that isn't quiet at all. It's the sound of 6 women all carefully not saying one thing while saying everything around it. Who needs work? Who can't make rent? Whose husband doesn't know about the penny club? None of these facts are stated directly, they come in sideways. I heard her cousin's boy is at the mill now means something. She's been looking tired lately means something else. You don't translate anymore. It arrives complete. Marie charges $1.50. That's a quarter of a day's wages if you're on the factory line. You come home with your hair set, your information current, and Dorothy's address in your pocket. The dryer knew nothing. You know considerably more. You are 15, and the counsellor's office is at the end of the corridor on the 2nd floor, and you have been sent there in March to discuss your plans, and the counsellor is a woman in her 50s who has the file in front of her with your grades, which are good, and your father's occupation, which is foreman at the steelworks. She does not look at the grades, she looks at the occupation. She closes the folder. She offers you nursing or clerical and asks you which you prefer. The folder contains 4 years of marks. Mathematics, solid. English, very good. A commendation from the science teacher, Mrs. Birch, who wrote a note in the margin saying you asked the right questions. The note is in the folder. The folder is closed. The counsellor has not opened it again and does not plan to. A 1954 survey of high school guidance counsellors in Ohio found that fewer than 1 in 10 would recommend a 4-year college program to a girl whose father worked in a factory, no matter what the grades said. Miss Pryor's coffee has gone cold in the thermos. She has had 10 of these meetings before lunch. The counsellor's name is Miss Pryor. She has a thermos of coffee on her desk and a framed needlepoint on the wall that says something about potential. She is not being cruel. That is the part that takes a moment to settle. She genuinely believes she is being practical, brisk, and quietly helpful, which is a different thing, and in 1954 it is a very confident thing to be. She explains that nursing is stable. She explains that clerical work is clean and respectable, indoors with regular hours. She does not explain what happens to clerical workers who become pregnant, which is that they are let go immediately, without severance, because pregnancy is considered incompatible with the professional image of the typing pool. That part isn't in the brochure. The brochure has nice fonts. By 1960, women will make up 68% of all U.S. clerical workers. The typing pool is not a stepping stone. It is a destination, and the destination has a low ceiling and no elevator. A typist in 1952 earns $35 to $50 a week, which is enough to live on if you are careful, and not enough to do much else. Miss Pryor calls this a good start. The mathematics teacher has already written to the state college on your behalf. You don't know this yet. The letter is sitting in an admissions office in a city 2 hours away, next to a small pile of similar letters, most of them about boys. The letter is not wrong about you. The letter will not be enough. There's a girl in your class, Pauline Marsh, whose father is an accountant, who is being encouraged toward the university's natural sciences program. Pauline is good at science. You are better. Pauline's folder has also been opened. The difference between your folders is not measurable in grades. It is measurable in her father's job title, which takes up exactly 1 line and changes everything below it. Miss Pryor slides 2 pamphlets across the desk. One is for a local nursing college. One is for a secretarial program that takes 9 months and costs $40, which your family does not have in one place but could probably assemble by September if your mother picks up an extra shift. The pamphlets have photographs of women smiling at tasks. The tasks are manageable, the smiles are committed. You pick clerical. You pick it because it sounds faster and the nursing program requires a physical exam and your family can't afford what the physical might find. Miss Pryor writes something down and nods as though something has been decided, which it has, though not by you. She thanks you for coming in. The folder stays closed on her desk as you leave. The corridor is long on the way back. The spring light comes in through the window at the end and lands on the floor in a long, pale rectangle, which you walk through without noticing because you are already doing the arithmetic on $40 in September. You work in a typing pool of 46 women in an open room on the 7th floor of a building on Madison, under fluorescent light that buzzes when the heat is on, and you type at 58 words a minute, which is acceptable, and you wear a skirt and stockings and heels, which is required. You are allowed to be married. You are not allowed to be pregnant, and the difference between the two has never been explained to anyone in writing. The supervisor walks the aisle. You do not look up. The wage is $38 a week. The man at the machine 2 floors down doing comparable data entry earns $62. You know this because his wife works at the desk next to yours and mentioned it once, quietly, over a sandwich, and then never mentioned it again. The gap is fully legal, tidily documented, and completely unremarkable, the way a drafty window is unremarkable. You just work in it. The supervisor's name is Mr. Fenwick. He controls bathroom permissions, not breaks, permissions. You raise your hand. He looks at his watch, which is a Bulova, and nods, or does not nod. On Thursdays he is slower with the nod. Nobody knows why Thursday. The bladder has learned to dread Thursday. 46 women in that room means 46 pairs of hands on 46 keys, and the cumulative sound is something between rainfall and a minor industrial operation. It is loud enough that you can have a conversation at normal speaking volume and not be heard 2 feet away, which is useful, because this is also where information moves. Eleanor Marsh, 3rd row from the window, fastest typist in the building at 67 words a minute, knows every clerical opening in a 6-block radius, which supervisors are decent, which firms still dismiss at the end of a woman's first trimester, and which one on 48th lets you keep the position if you promise to leave before you show. Eleanor is not a gossip. Eleanor is precise, untiring, and quietly indispensable. The math is specific. You are 26. You have been here 4 years. Promotions exist. Senior typist, then assistant secretary, then possibly executive secretary if you are very fast, very quiet, and very unlikely to leave for domestic reasons. The phrase domestic reasons covers marriage, children, care of a parent, and anything else that might make you a complicated investment. You are, at all times, auditioning for the appearance of uncomplicated. The audition has no end date. Pregnancy ends it immediately. Not formally, not a signed document, not a meeting with HR, because HR in 1952 is mostly a filing cabinet. It's a conversation. The conversation is short. You are thanked for your service, which takes about 90 seconds, and you leave with whatever is in your desk drawer and no severance, because severance is for people who didn't do something to themselves. What you did was get pregnant. The distinction is load-bearing. Back home, there is a woman on your street who took in typing after her 3rd child, piecework, from home, at 20 cents a page. She set up in the kitchen after the dishes were cleared and typed until 11. The machine sat on the same table where everyone ate breakfast. It had a sticky E key that she compensated for with a slight extra force, automatic by the 3rd month. She was paid by the page. The page did not include a Bulova and a bathroom policy. This was, in its way, an improvement. And so the day ends, mostly. The fire is low, the ash bucket is full. The mince has been stretched into Wednesday. The ledger in your head has balanced, or balanced enough, which is what balancing actually means in a household with a tallyman due Wednesday and a penny club tin on the mantel. The wireless is on. The orange you had in mind for the children is still on the shelf at the corner store, because the orange is for Christmas, and Christmas, mercifully, is in 3 months. There were a lot of you. The 1950 census counted 18 million women in the American paid labor force. The 1951 British census found 37% of dwellings without a fixed bath. You were not the exception, you were the majority. The Ladies' Home Journal simply had a different audience in mind. The Ladies' Home Journal is still in the magazine rack by the door. The kettle, which has heard all this before, declines to weigh in. But none of that is your problem tonight. The dishes are stacked. The wireless is humming. The coal scuttle is full for tomorrow, with the patient, settled, and reliably unspectacular weight of a job already done. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day go. Let the kettle be tomorrow's problem. You don't have to lay the fire before dawn. Sleep well.